Hello everyone, this is KIDM the Man bringing you all another figure review or Megazord review of the Hasbro's Power Rangers Lightning Collection Zord Ascension project, Mighty Morphin DragonZord. It is finally after the 1st of October, which means I am now allowed to post this particular review. And it's not because of how I want to stylize this particular review in my own particular standards, which is why it's slightly a bit delayed. Now here you have the DragonZord along with his accessories. I have a feeling this is going to be a very long video. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to take a good look at the DragonZord first, his accessories second, and then maybe we will include some special segment at the end of this video. Now let's get the Megazord to stop spinning around first, move his accessories aside, and take a closer look at the DragonZord. Fair warning though, there's going to be a potential shaky cam, or a shaky Megazord. Now in case you were wondering, yes, this is my second copy of the DragonZord. If you would have noticed from the unboxing segment, you would have seen that there is something amiss. His left kneecap was missing. So basically after that unboxing segment, I immediately drove back to my dealer's shop the very next day, picked up this second copy, and that's what you are seeing right here. I'm basically allowing the figure to turn around so that you can get a good look at it in a much more closer view. As this is my first Zap Megazord, I gotta say, the painting and the sculpting of this Megazord is amazing. I honestly did not want to buy a Zap Dino Megazord and a Zap DragonZord because I'm kinda already bored of the whole Mighty Morphin era. But since Zap landed in Malaysia very early, I feel that it is my duty to show you how beautiful it is. I actually skipped out on a lot of news on how the Zap Megazord would look like, so when I unboxed it for the first time, I was very surprised that it came with chrome plastic. However, it does concern me that the chrome on this Megazord will eventually chip if you're not very careful. In Zord Ascension project fashion, Hasbro has taken some liberty in redesigning this entire Megazord, whilst following the traditional look of it. If the original Megazord was any indication, you will see some original designs or extra details that you would not have seen on the show, since it was literally a man in a rubber suit. But surprisingly enough, with that creative design, we got some nice chrome on this particular Megazord. You're definitely gonna get your greasy fingers all over the chrome plastic, but that's okay because you can just take some soft cloth just so you can wipe it off. The DragonZord head is nicely sculpted and detailed, and you can also see the wrinkly part of the DragonZord nose that gives it some character. You might not be able to see it on camera right now, but you can actually see that this DragonZord does have some red eyes, which is actually contributed by another separate part. And in case you don't know, there is actually a cockpit on the head of this Megazord. And with some hinge joint friction, you can actually keep the cockpit locked in place. Simply just find a small opening on the head itself, and when you flip it open, there's Tommy. Despite the cockpit area being very small, it is as detailed as it can be. From the side, you get a clearer view of the particular red eyes on the DragonZord. Not only that, you get to see the nice chrome horn on the DragonZord itself. Plus, Hasbro has included the gold accents on the pattern of the Megazord, as well as some nice emerald green or metallic green and some gold paint. Again, since the plastic on the head fin is made out of chrome, you really have to be careful when you're doing any kind of transformation or any kind of posing, as the chrome might chip off. But look at how shiny it is. Now, in case you didn't know, I'm more of a design focused kind of guy, because that's why we are paying a premium for. I can't say this enough, but the chrome on the Megazord is very reflective, where you can literally see me waving right at you from the reflection. But enough about that. Other than the chrome on the chest, you can also see that the surrounding orbs in the middle of the chest is made out of clear translucent red plastic, which is clearly paying homage to the original DragonZord, where the middle of the chest has some electronic functions. Basically, it lights up and plays some nice sounds. The premium design is consistent on the side arm of the figure, or basically the chest of a certain mold. Still nicely chrome and nicely painted. The extra artisanal design of the Zord is consistent throughout the entire waist of the figure. The paint on the Zyuranger Z is nicely applied, and his big thunder thighs does have the additional features on them. The quality of the paint here is consistent, but do be aware that there are some paint discrepancies. That basically relates to the different coats of silver on the upper thighs. The Dragon Coin logo on the side now has a chrome look to it, and that also includes the kneecaps on the DragonZord. With the amount of chrome available on this particular Zap DragonZord, it really does give you the feeling that you are having the original 1993 DragonZord. Only this time, it's not a brick. As for his feet or dragon toes, there's so many iterations of what the toes color look like, I kind of forgot what the original color is. Is it silver? Is it gold? Off-white? I can't remember anymore. It's debatable whether or not are his toes in the correct color. You still get the same mechanical designs on the lower half of his legs. However, and hopefully the camera picks it up, you might see some different coating finishes of the silver on his legs. As for the bottom of the feet, the consistency of the design continues. This is obviously needed for any transformation sequence. But since the corner of the feet are not raised, and in the event that you are not even going to transform this figure, you really have to be careful, because you definitely are going to get some scuff marks and damage the nice detailed paint. Speaking of potential scuff marks that could be avoidable, you also get his tail. Now depending on how you pose his tail, if you let his tail rest on the floor that it is standing on, you might scuff off the paint on the part of the tail that is resting on the floor. But luckily for us, all of the tail segments are on dumbbell joints, which if you own the Soul of Chogokin version, or the Legacy version, or maybe even the Super Mini Pla version, you should be familiar with this design by now. As compared to the original 1993 version, the tail was still a brick, and the part that connects the tail to the tailbone, it's on a hinge joint. And speaking of joints, I believe it's time for us to check out the new possibilities of the Zap DragonZord. The head fin, for transformation purposes, is on a hinge joint. His jaw can move up and down, unpack his chrome chest from the body, and you will have a hinge joint for his arm. But fair warning though, you really gotta be gentle with it, otherwise you might potentially break the hinge joint. As he can now spread his arms open, he will be able to welcome you in for a hug. And after taking a close attention on that hinge joint, I can safely conclude that you can't really rotate his arm. And just like the Soul of Chogokin version, you have this area here which allows him to extend his hand right out. You don't really need to put your finger in there to rotate it, just rotate it like normal by holding his hand, as there isn't a nub for you to use your finger to push it in. The DragonZord hand is on a ball joint, and there's a hinge for you for extra articulation and for transformation purposes. Use a come hither motion to flip out his front skirt, and as you can see from the waist, there is a semicircle available, which is there to allow him to have a minimal ab crunch. His legs are on a hinge joint, which allows him to have a decent spread. The legs also has a nice ratchety hinge joint, which would allow him to kick up that far and kick back that far. There is a bend at the knee, which is required for transformation too, and his feet is on a ball joint, which allows him to have a nice ankle pivot. Out of the box, he comes with stiff fingers hands, relaxed posing hands, manicured, missile ready hands, some nice semi-cleared missile launch effect piece, which can be inserted in the stiff hands, a familiar accessory for the Dino Staff, extra hands for the Dino Megazord, extra cosmetic pieces, and two 1/44th scale Tommies. Fair warning though, if you want to put the alternative hands on the DragonZord, you have to be extra careful, because the ball joint is super tiny, and since these hands are made of soft rubber plastic, sometimes the hole can get tight, so you might want to lube it up before insertion, because it's definitely a tight fit, and if you push too hard, you might damage the hinge joint on the arm. So all in all, the Zap DragonZord is pretty cool. It really brings back a lot of nostalgic memories, as if you saw the DragonZord for the very first time. If you had the 93 version, which I don't, having the Zap DragonZord will take you back to that peaceful time when you were a kid. I, for one, never owned the 93 DragonZord, so I have no idea how that feels. But I do own the Legacy version, and I gotta say, in terms of design, the Zap DragonZord does beat the Legacy. Even if the Zap DragonZord doesn't come with die-cast parts, we do get some nice shiny chrome parts, which kinda makes you want to be careful with this, just so that you don't chip off the chrome parts. Or even worse, scratch it. Since it is nice and light, you won't have to worry about the Zord tumbling over, so that's a plus in my book. Pricing wise, as the economy is going down, I believe that this is a price range that we need to get used to. So if you only have the Zap DragonZord, this is as far as you go in terms of what you can do with it. But if you have the Zap Dino Megazord, you're in for a little treat. Speaking of treat, this segment would not be made possible if not for my dealer and his crew over at Gila Poster KL. My dealer was kind enough to loan me his copy of the Zord Ascension project Mighty Morphin Dino Megazord, just so that we can have a combination segment for the Zap DragonZord. So if you want to check out what my dealer has in his store, feel free to check out the links in the description. He now ships products overseas, so I'm confident that all of you watching this will have a chance in getting newly released items. Remember to let him know that I've sent you his way, and now back to the video. And here you have the DragonZord along with the Dinozords. Now I'm sure this does really take everyone back to their childhood era when they see these 6 Zords on the screen. So here's a short size comparison between all of the other Zap Megazords along with the DragonZord. Have a good look, because you're not going to see this anymore once we proceed to the transformation. We have a nice instruction sheet provided to us by Hasbro, so we can basically go through all of the tiny details on how we can form the... I actually forgot about the name of this form. As this is my second Megazord review, let's try to make a nice transformation sequence. First off, let's put aside the Megazords that we will not be using for this transformation. Let's get started. And here we have the DragonZord in battle mode. Had to Google that name to find out. And just like in the show, this mode is more phenomenal. No matter how many times you've seen it before, this mode does look awesome. Even with the extra detailing of the Zap Megazords, you finally get yourself a real grade type version of the DragonZord in battle mode. With all of the intricate details included in the Zap Megazord line, it really does make the look of the Zord pop. I especially like how Hasbro has taken the liberty to redesign the battle mode head. What they decide to do in this iteration is to number 1, mold the face of the Megazord, and number 2, put a clear translucent red plastic over it. If I remember correctly from previous iterations, it used to be just a solid plastic piece. In fact, it's actually molded as the Megazord's face. This new look to him does give it the exact same feeling that you would get when you see the Dino Megazord's face. Plus, this red translucent plastic does double as the eyes for the DragonZord, even though you could rarely see it on camera throughout the entirety of this review. Now that he's in battle mode, you get to see how shiny and clear the red visor is. Plus, just like the Mighty Morphin helmet design, you get to see his silver lips. Honestly speaking, the process of trying to get him into this mode was very nerve-wracking. Not only do I have to be very extra careful with the borrowed unit that I got from my dealer, trying to navigate myself with the arms of the DragonZord can also be a little stressful. As I mentioned earlier, those particular hinges aren't really that strong. So if you would like to combine it in this particular position, you really gotta be gentle with it. Not only that, trying to remove the middle chest piece of the DragonZord itself is not enjoyable. Unlike the previous versions when all it did was just slide in between the DragonZord, this version has its own clips. And the clips aren't durable themselves. Imagine if you were trying to transform the DragonZord into this particular mode, or any other mode for that matter. You really have to take your sweet time in trying to make sure that you do not break those clips. Because if you do end up breaking those clips, your DragonZord is gonna be like a senior citizen with a loose chest. But at least it will still be held up by its waist, so it won't look saggy. Speaking of the chest, we still have to make his dino staff. Just by following the instructions, it's pretty much very simple. First things first, you gotta dismantle the tail from the third ball joint area. Please be very careful when you're separating it. Take your hollowed out chest piece and place the tail on the peg. It's a tight fit. Take the included staff cane and peg that in, and then flip out the handle from the dragon chest. And here you have the dino staff. It's not like it's something that we haven't seen before, but it is a nice weapon. Especially when the Zap version is taking a note from the SOC version by allowing you to separate the ball joints on the tail. I don't have the SOC version, so I wouldn't know. Just by looking at existing reviews online, this is how it was done for the SOC version. As for the Legacy version, it's been a while, but I don't recall that you can separate the ball joints from the dragon tail, which leads you to having a super long dino staff. With this new innovation, we finally get a show accurate dino staff, which pairs perfectly well with the DragonZord in battle mode. And finally, after 30 years of Megazord innovation, the DragonZord in battle mode can finally hold the dragon staff. And it's pretty much in scale as to how you would see it in the show. No more extra flimsy accessories that we would have to use that would ultimately go missing, just like the 1993 version, or attempt to do some kind of camera trick just like the Legacy version to make it look like he's holding the weapon. As for the SOC, I can't remember how you let him hold the weapon. Speaking of holding the weapon, we can finally use the extra hands that came with the DragonZord, using the same method as you would if you were to change the hands of the Dino Megazord, basically a hand with a bigger hole. And since the extra hand is made out of a semi-soft plastic rubber material, you can have the DragonZord in battle mode pick up his staff. And here he is holding his dino staff. And I gotta be honest, ever since I've seen the DragonZord in battle mode hold the dino staff like a proper staff weapon, I've always wanted to recreate it in figure form. We couldn't do that with the 1993 version, but we can imagine. We couldn't do that with the Legacy. We can also imagine. We might not have been able to do it with the SOC, please correct me if I'm wrong, but now with our latest rendition of the DragonZord in battle mode, we finally can do it. And it took us around 29 to 30 years to achieve this. And that is truly amazing. Fair warning though, when it comes to posing a character that has a staff weapon, you really have to pre-pose the arm first before letting him having to hold the staff. The main reason for that is simple. One arm goes up, the other must go down. So that way you can have a perfectly posed Zord with a staff weapon. Another thing to note is that since he's holding extra plastic right in front of him, he might lean forward like Michael Jackson. He also has the propensity to make his own splits. What I mean by this is that due to the extra plastic that he's holding right now, depending on how you would pose the battle mode, you might risk wearing out the hinges in between his legs. Now, although you could blame this on the saber-toothed tiger and the triceratops, the extra few milligrams of the dino staff doesn't really help. However, despite all of the caveats I mentioned, the Zap DragonZord in battle mode does look amazing. I wonder how the other mode would look. And here we have the Mega DragonZord. But wait, I'm not finished. The DragonZord actually did come with two extra parts. Basically, these extra parts are known as vanity parts, where they are meant to go into the slots on top of his shoulder. Simply just clip them in, be careful so that you don't scratch the chrome, and now the Mega DragonZord is complete. I gotta say, I really did not expect Hasbro to give us these vanity pieces. Mainly because the previous iterations of DragonZord did not come with these types of pieces. But since the Zap line is trying to do their own unique thing, I kinda appreciate these attempts to make these Zords look as artistic as possible. But no matter how artistic a particular Zord would look, there's always gonna be some setbacks. For the Legacy and the SOC version, due to the heaviness of their die-cast metal parts, it makes the Zord a little flimsy. However, for the Zap version, since it's made purely out of plastic, you would think that it will make it much more sturdy. However, I feel that that might not be the case. Due to how the knees of the Dino Megazord has their own articulation, sometimes you might get some unwanted bends. Not to mention the extra added weight of the DragonZord doesn't really help. Now that the Dino Megazord's shoulder pad is folded downwards, you can't really utilize the elbow joints of the Dino Megazord. And if you want to utilize the possibilities of the knee joints, fair warning, it's gonna be a balancing act. You just need to pose him to a certain sweet spot, and then he will hold his position. So take your time with your Mega DragonZord and treat him like a newborn baby. Another gripe I have is that these vanity clips aren't really clips, as what you mainly need to do is to slide the clips in and basically let it rest there. Careful not to store him in high places, otherwise those clips will disappear when you lose them. But of course, we still have another unofficial mode where you can see this particular Megazord using these particular pieces. They weren't really on the show, so it's not show accurate, but from old sketches and previous iterations of the Mega DragonZord has these particular pieces included. We should include them here as well. Another fair warning though, since the ball joint on the particular leg, it kinda looks slightly bigger than the peg hole of the dragon tail. I recommend you removing the DragonZord first and then only applying it. Guess what I really need is some lube. As for the other side, it's pretty much straightforward. And here we have the fully assembled unofficial mode of the Mega DragonZord. Yes, of course, it is quite a pain to put the dragon tail into that particular peg, which kinda took me a couple of minutes. But putting on the centerpiece of the DragonZord on the other leg was simple enough. From what I can see from particular fan arts, the dragon tail is like a new drill weapon, while the chest of the DragonZord is like a shield or a shield that contains some kind of lasers. But what I'm glad to tell you is that you can kind of recreate those type of images. What I mean by that is that since you can rotate the legs of the DragonZord, you can recreate certain kind of poses. It's not much of a difference, but it is very much appreciated. I mean, it's much better than just having a nice, pretty, artistic, glorified brick. So all in all, the Zap DragonZord is pretty amazing. Other than just having the nostalgic feeling of having the 1993 version, where the chrome is reintroduced back into the DragonZord, you also get a lot of playability with the accessories that you have. Albeit, most of the playability would have to rely on the Dino Megazord. But if you manage to get both of those copies, you are going to have a good time. But for now, I'm just going to return the DinoZord back to my dealer at Gila Poster KL, and I need to find a good place to put this DragonZord. Perhaps you can see him in a follow-up video on how he looks like on the shelf. So here he is next to the Zap DinoZord, the Legacy DinoZord, which scales pretty well, and the Legacy DragonZord, who looks like a big chunky boy. And welcome to the bonus feature. Since all of you were nice enough to stick around for part 1, where we take a closer look at the Zap DragonZord, you were even nice enough to stick around for part 2, where we take a closer look at the combination. So, as a bonus, why not we take a look at the comparisons between the Legacy and the Zap DragonZord. As I mentioned earlier, I do not have the SOC version. But if I did, maybe I'll make another bonus feature. Who knows? Now I have said it before, but I'll say it again. I am really more of a design conscious kind of guy. Other than the Legacy DragonZord being a big chunky boy, his design is mostly based off on a suit that you have seen on the show. So if you want to know on which DragonZord is the most show accurate, that point belongs to the Legacy DragonZord. From its nice show accurate paint job to its die-cast metal parts, to its literal size that was translated from the show. Whereas for the Zap DragonZord, we've already known from the very beginning that the Zord Ascension line is a line on its own, where Hasbro has taken the liberty of redesigning the Zords to make it look as stylized as possible. When I mentioned real grade earlier, I'm mostly referring to the real grade line of Gundam plastic model kits, where for those model kits, they have additional design included to give you a view on how it looks like if it exists in real life. Hence why we have all of the additional patterns on the Zap Megazords. So in the event if you're trying to compare these two DragonZords, it won't be a really fair comparison because they were designed based on different motives. So if you prefer a show accurate version, you can go for the Legacy, and if you prefer a real great touch, you can go for the Zap DragonZord. But ultimately, they both look good in my book. As for the battle mode, the chunky Legacy version does live up to its name. Due to how the Legacy version is designed to look like a suit on the show, it doesn't really translate well in figure form, where the huge arm of the DragonZord now becomes a huge chest in battle mode. Whereas for the Zap battle mode, just by looking at it, it does have an elegant design to it, seeing as the chest piece is now slimmer and that the arms are slimmer too. In fact, the chest is not the only variable that makes the design look sleek, it also has to do with its waist, where the waist of the Zap DragonZord is significantly slimmer as compared to the waist of the Legacy DragonZord. As for the use of the Dino Staff, it's pretty much what you would expect. The Legacy version does have a longer staff since it cannot be separated, whereas the Zap version does look like it's in the right spot. Sure, you could argue that the Legacy version does look big and menacing, but the Zap version does look a bit more elegant. And don't forget, he can dual wield the Dino Staff. And lastly, the Mega DragonZord. Now I can't put them side by side because of how wide they are, but that only applies to the front of the Zords. In terms of show accuracy between the two, the Legacy version is the closest. Design wise, I'm still gonna go with the Zap Mega DragonZord. That might be due to how fancy it looks with the chrome. The height discrepancies between the two is pretty obvious, and since the Legacy does have the die-cast metal parts on the DragonZord's leg, it does make him lean forward a little, if not all the way down if you did not have the support parts for the legs. As for the Zap counterpart, since the Dino Megazord is considered quite new, the knees can actually hold the weight of the DragonZord. And honestly, just by looking at these two side by side, you can clearly see which one is better, and that would be the version that you would prefer. So if you like this video, blast that like button, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think of the Zap DragonZord, share this video with your friends and family to let them know what they're getting into, and consider subscribing, as it would really help the channel. I hope you like my approach to figure reviews so far, and do let me know how I can make them better. All of these rushed emergency reviews have been fun, but I really do miss scripting out my reviews. Maybe I'll focus on that next time. Feel free to check out my social media accounts, on Twitter and Instagram at KIDMTheMan, and feel free to visit Gila Poster KL should you want to get anything early. This is KIDMTheMan, and I'll see you all next time.